Okay, so hi everyone. We are back with Rachel Ross Smith. I'm gonna link all the videos we've done together. Rachel and I came into each other's lives. Well, we used to say randomly, but I don't think it's random anymore. I don't believe in random coincidences. We came into each other's lives, and you could see the evolution and growth in her and I just by looking at our past videos. But this past year has been monumental for both her and I in different ways, but also there are many parallels. And we were like, we got to keep our tradition going. We got to come back and tap into that magic and almost like a diary, keep track of what's going on and share it with you guys. So hey Rachel, I'm so happy to have you here.
It's so good to be here. And I really feel like that because I was trying to remember. So I guess this would be like our third year running, right?
Hmm.
From
Yes.
that first interview.
Hmm. That was, I don't even, like, when I look at who we were and who we are now, I don't even understand how, like, it's like two different people, like,
Yeah.
and, so Rachel had a really beautiful, spiritual awakening experience in 2021. Yeah, I think about that one, 2021. Yeah. And I had a very deep spiritual experience as well. And it was kind of nice to be able to chat with her about it. And I wanted to ask her to come on and share her story and also when I speak with her it makes it easier for me to share as well, and
Yeah.
that's the magic of finding souls that are aligned, like soul sisters and women who and men who help you be your authentic self. So I just want to genuinely say that I really appreciate that about Rachel. And every time we get together, it's like I get to be me, I get to do me. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think I'm excited because I know this is a tradition we're going to keep following through with. And I get so excited at the potential of, this is 3 years in and what we'll be doing 3 years from now. And it's going to be a beautiful experience to be able to look back, when we've done a few more of these episodes and just see that progression in life. But I'm right there with you. 2021 was one of the biggest spiritual awakening years for me. Since I had my breakthrough originally in 2015, and I began to step into that journey of becoming conscious, which by all means has not been an easy path, but I'm so glad that I made the decision to step into that. So I'm excited for what will come through this conversation, and the golden nuggets that we'll be able to share with your audience as well.
Awesome. So just to give you guys a bit of a template of what happened for both Rachel. And it's so funny because even me myself in 2015 is when if you go back to our videos that when she said, I was like, oh yes, I remember now. We both had our
Yeah.
breakthroughs, and yes, it is a bumpy road, but one that is well worth it.
Oh,
So
100%.
yeah, so for those of you who do follow me on my channel, I'll link that video below where I spoke about my social media break that got me to have a very massive spiritual awakening. And I am due to do a follow up of that video because what I shared in that video is like this much of what actually happened. And Rachel did ayahuasca. It's
Yeah.
ayahuasca at Rythmia,
Okay.
which is something I may do one day. I don't know, but she had a very powerful shift, and I wanted to ask her if she was willing to come on and talk about it because some of the things that she shared, it was nice because I was going through the same thing after. And I even told her, like, when I came back here, we'll get to it. I was like, I was so happy I'd spoken to her because I was like, okay, this is normal. And the transitions are, you don't want to feel alone, is what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say in those moments. And so,
Yeah.
Rachel, if you, however much you're willing to share, I would love to know
Yeah.
all about your ayahuasca experience. And
Yeah.
because you did it with and by the way, she did it with a very well reputed place, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
this isn't like, okay, I'm gonna go and take some mushrooms. It's like
No.
going. So yeah,
Yeah.
tell us, give us the whole 411. Give us the
Yeah.
whole breakdown. Yeah.
I'm excited that it's happening this week for sharing, because so basically what happened, and just what we spoke briefly on before we started to record this episode, really for me, that journey, although it was January 2021, that journey for me went through right until November, middle end of November 21, which I'll share more with you. But it's really been this I gave glimpses and little insights, but for me it was quite a personal journey. I knew I had to go on it before I started speaking about it, and it wasn't until last week that I actually shared my first piece of content specifically on my experience. But I made the decision to go to Costa Rica, and I went to a retreat space called Rythmia. So Rythmia is an incredible center. They've been, I think this is their 8th year now, and they've worked with, it's somewhere around 8,000 people now.
Wow.
And so I think they're recognized as like #1 globally for accommodation on TripAdvisor. I'm sure that's what they'd shared with us. I need to check it out. But Rythmia is just an incredible place. And so what happened is I went there for a week back in January. Now, there's some prep work that you go through before you go. There's a special diet that you follow. And I just want to say here as well, like you said, this is not something that you just jump into, and like, for some people, maybe it is, but I believe really it's a calling. I really believe there's a calling. And for me at that point in time, ayahuasca and Rythmia as the facilitator have been a key element in my spiritual development. But I had been experiencing callings before that. I'd had a couple of experiences in the UK using ayahuasca through my healing journey. They were just really brushing the surface. It was actually the first lockdown. I had access to a shaman and was able to provide me with some ayahuasca and experience there, but it was nothing and not a patch on what Rythmia deliver. And so it really is a calling. And for you, if you're listening to this podcast episode, you may have noticed that more recently you've been hearing people speak about ayahuasca. You may have noticed your insight and your interest starting to develop around it. And so just take these as signs. For me, it was no awareness of it. And then I was aware of it. And then before I knew it, somebody was talking to me on a weekly basis about it. So that's what I mean. Like, I believe it's a calling. It's a spirit in itself that we're working with here. And so there is that element of being called to it. And I believe it's a real big part of the shift in consciousness that's happening in the world right now. And one of the tools that we can use to support us with that as well. So that's just a little bit about the journey towards Rythmia. And then Rythmia itself was delivered over a week long experience.
I thought it was like a 1-day event, but it's a whole week.
Oh, it's a week.
Oh wow. Okay.
And
that makes a lot more sense actually.
Yeah.
Because because I imagine you have like a huge breakthrough, and then what happens after.
Yeah.
And
that's something I want to say just there. If you're at a point in time, and I know this is something that you're interested in, Atena, as well, and something that you're just maybe starting to explore through the conversations we've had, it's doing it like that. So going to a retreat with people that are trained and they're supportive, and you're in that environment for an extended period of time. I believe that's the best way to do it, especially the first time. I have done the 1-day things, but it's just nothing compared to the experience.
Yeah. I can totally even understand. I understand exactly what you're saying, because it's not at all the same. But when I did my social media break, and I spent a good month every day meditating for hours and hours, doing breath work and all of that. And I actually watched at some point later on a documentary on Netflix where they were talking about psychedelics, and one of the massive realizations I had was similar to a psychedelic. So that's why I was like, okay, we have something similar going on. But it's like when someone says, okay, I'm just gonna unplug from everyone for a day. I'm like, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, unplug for weeks, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Like, that is when you stop and you focus. And I can only imagine when you're a collective, because when you're a collective, like the energy is it's just not the same. Like it's very, it's very potent and it's very liberating. It's kind of like when we
Yeah.
do group coaching versus one-on-one coaching. Both are amazing, but when you do something in a group, sometimes it's
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's powerful, and I fully believe, with the Rythmia experience, you are brought together with people from all around the world. And the group that I was part of, I think there was like 47 people, if I remember correctly, so somewhere between 45 and 50 people. And these are individuals from all over the world, from there was Russians to UK to America, everywhere in between. And you've got individuals from all different backgrounds, people with fashion businesses, coaches,
Ooh, I love that.
actors, um, moms, stay-at-home wives, just all the different kinds of people are within this group, and you've all been brought together. But one thing that everybody said was, we were meant to be here at this time together. Like I believe
I
in soul
believe that.
contracts. These are people that
Yeah.
have we've got that contract with. And it was interesting as the week played out, because what we've seen is that every individual in that group almost played a part. And so, for example, one of the nights, and I'll go into the experience a little more as we go forward in the conversation, but the Thursday, for example, so you're doing breath work, yoga every day. We have the Michael Beckwith's, The Answer Is You course, that was delivered by Kim Stanwood and his one of his partners. And so access to really incredible material. It's not just about the ceremony, and as in terms of the ayahuasca ceremony. In fact, the whole week's looked at as a ceremony. And so you're just in it for that full week, which I believe is one of the reasons it is like having 10 years of personal development, 2 years of therapy, and like a heck of a lot of healing just all in once. But it came apparent as the week went on, like everybody's there playing a part, as we all are in this world, but everybody was there in that week playing a part. And my evidence for that came on the Thursday. I had quite a blissful experience. My week started off in complete, utter like chaos, and sort of transitioned into this blissful experience in the fourth ceremony on the Thursday. And I had some of my own work to do, but the plan, ayahuasca, she said to me, you're done now. You need to hold space. And so I was asked to hold space, and I actually sat in my position for 2 hours. You're not talking to each other. It's very much an individual experience, but I was asked to hold space. And so me and this other girl, who I'm now very good friends with, we were both given the same message, we found out afterwards. And I literally sat in a meditative state for 2 hours and just held space for the room. And she was doing the same at the same time.
Wow.
And one of the guys who was in there, he was one of the actor guys, came from an acting background. He looked over at me, and again, I only found this out afterwards, while he was in a place of despair, and he said seeing me sitting up was the thing that kept him going while he was in that experience.
Oh my gosh, I got chills from that. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it was amazing. So like the people that you were there with, and that was a huge part of the whole experience as well. And yeah, so yeah, just that element I wanted to share there.
I love that. And so, whatever you're comfortable sharing, like what was your big breakthrough?
Yeah.
Because you shared some with me, but I don't know how much you're sharing. I don't know if I saw the post. I think I saw it, but I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
like, what was your biggest breakthrough, and how was that transitioning coming back?
Yeah. So for me, the experience was, I went in and I was like, okay, I'm going here to find my next like element of my purpose and my mission, and like Aya's going to give me like more of that, and I'm going to come out with all these business ideas, and like, that was my like attitude going in. And,
Yeah.
and we got there, and the first day you have to have your medical done. So I'm like going in to get my medical done, and the doctor's asking me all these questions, and I'm having to divulge all this information. We probably touched on this a little on our first call, 3 years ago. But I'm having to divulge this information about my past. So about my mental health. I spoke about that. We've spoken about that on these
And
episodes before, the mental health.
I'll link that video below so that anyone who wants to
Yeah.
watch, yeah, yeah, because you went in quite deep in that, like very
Yeah.
openly.
Yeah, so that's all in that episode. And so the mental health issues I dealt with, as deep and as dark an experience as being suicidal. So I'm having to like divulge all of this stuff, some of the childhood trauma that I went through, the narcotics that I used to use as an escapism method. I had to list all this stuff out to this doctor that I just met. And it's important that they know, because you're going into this huge experience. So they need to know about your trauma and things in case it could be an influence within your ceremony, which it is for most of us. So I had this crazy experience from the start where I was like, whoa, like what's this? Because I'm going through this even in the medical. And
Yeah,
it kind of was,
as
sorry,
no,
go.
but as you're saying this, I literally just thought really quickly of all the things that I would have to mention, and right away I could feel how that could be. I don't know the word, uncomfortable, liberating, all the things,
Mhm.
because yeah, no, as you said that, I was like, okay, this isn't like, unless you've had a very easy peasy lemon squeezy life, like we
Mm.
all have like trials and tribulations. So yeah, I could see how that is already like going in.
Yeah. And I think what caught me is like I said, I went in with this whole attitude of like, this is what it's going to mean for me. I've done all the hard work.
I would literally do the same thing. After I spoke with you, I was like, no, no.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it was like. I was like, no, bitch, you've got some work to do. So like the Monday, within like half an hour, so the breath work we did prior, the yoga, it was incredible. We had our prep, because you have classes to prep you for the ceremony. And then the first ceremony was the Monday night, and I spent 6 hours in child's pose, moving. The plant was moving my body, just moving all of the cells and the muscles and
It
all of
it
the
doesn't hurt
areas.
to be 6 hours in a child pose. Like I love it. I spend maybe 5 to 20 minutes max. 6 hours. Wow.
So I was going from like head down to sitting up, and I was just in this constant movement, and it was a purge. Like I was going through a deep purge. So purge is a part of the experience. And for me, what this was the childhood trauma I hadn't dealt with, the emotional impact of my addictions, of the way I used to live my life, of traumatic experiences, of emotional discomfort from family connections, like all of the things. And I was just being encouraged to purge and release. And I literally spent that 6 hours crying and being sick and sneezing and laughing. And it was just this immense release of all of these
Mm,
suppressed emotions, but on a cellular level as well, because it's
mm,
working with you on a physical level, not just emotional and spiritual. And that was 100% going on before I'd even got to Costa Rica. I had some things go on, the month before, where my body was in intense pain. I couldn't explain where it was coming from, but it was this manifestation of just the past suppression that I had no awareness of on a conscious level, but it was there. And so the
mm-hmm,
Monday for me was this clearing out and releasing. And so the breakthrough, just to answer the question on that specific element of the experience, was just that understanding of how much we hold in our bodies on a physical level, in regards to past experiences, and why, what it taught me. And this is something I've taken forward. I'm teaching it now, and I have a good understanding, and I know there's more to learn. Just that importance of us sitting with our troubled experiences, our trauma, the not so nice feelings, because what can happen is that they will manifest in our body sometime, which somewhere and someplace,
mm-hmm.
which goes to dis-ease, which turns into disease, and of course longer term conditions. So I know I'm just the beginning of my journey with this, but I feel very passionate about it, and I hope one day we'll be learning about that in schools.
Oh yes.
I think
Oh
it's
my goodness.
important. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. When I was doing my training for Reiki, this was one of the biggest openings because we spent a lot of time, like I would like loathe. I'm like, oh my gosh, sometimes it's 3 hours of sitting down. Okay. but, but it was like just having that teacher be like every time sit down, and she walked us through some of the things that happened in her life, like especially with menopause and stuff. And like, say, sit with the pain, sit with all of it, and stop trying to fix everything so quickly. Because
Yeah.
sometimes when you try to fix it so quickly, you try to repress it, and then the more you repress it,
Yeah.
it stays there. It stays there, and
Yeah.
unconsciously you are actually giving it more fuel, right?
Yeah.
In some ways, it's not the easiest to sit with your discomfort, but once you
Yeah.
start doing it, it's like life changing,
Yeah.
and it's like I even caught myself. I mean, Rachel and I were talking about this just a moment ago, where these things happen when you have that frantic energy, or whatever it is, and you've got to catch yourself and be like, okay, what's the deeper layer? What's going on there? Can I sit with this without having to do? Can I
Yeah.
be, right? Am I getting
Yeah.
it? Is that
Yeah.
what it is? Just
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah. Yeah.
share it again. Okay, so we just had to press pause, and Rachel and I had a conversation that now we're like we should share this. Well, I'll share it because we were talking about the physical, what can be suppressed, and how some events can really deeply install triggers in you. So I was telling Rachel there was a moment whenever my husband would cook a specific kind of meat, and it would get very smoky in the house. I would
Mm.
get uncontrollable rage. And I'm not just talking like, oh, I'm a little upset, like very angry to the point of it would scare me. I'm like, I've lost control of my entire body. Eventually, when we were in Antigua, after my spiritual awakening, there was a moment I just thought, okay, I already like it had happened maybe 4 or 5 times, so not like a regular thing. When I could sense that rage coming out, I just stepped away, walked away, waited to calm down because it was completely illogical. He had never done anything wrong, and and eventually I understood what it was because I had a conversation with my mother when I was in Antigua. She shared a lot about past traumas, a lot of ancestral wounds and whatnot. And when I was born, this was the day after Iraq started bombing Tehran, and the hospital was actually non existent. And where my mom was going to give birth to me, there were so many burn victims, like burnt, like their skin was burnt. And she actually asked, am I allowed to give birth? Like in her mind, she's like, how can I give birth to, like, the existentialism started
Mm.
at that trauma. And this is not to, by the way, any blame on my mom. Like I can't even imagine the conditions that she was put in. um
Mm-hmm.
and when she said that, I understood it, and I was like, this is where this comes from. And it's wild because about 2 days ago, we cooked meat again, and it got smoky. And because I understood it and I had realized like I can let this go,
Mm-hmm.
it actually didn't trigger me. And I think even he's to the point where he's like, you know what, it's too cold for you to walk outside. Maybe we shouldn't cook this tonight. And I'm like, no, let's try. I
Yeah.
actually openly, it's like, let's try, let's see if I'm triggered, because now I recognize it. And that's the beauty of recognizing something. It's no longer unconscious. Once you make the
Yeah.
unconscious conscious, it is that much easier to let go. But anyways, I just wanted to share that because this happened before I'm born, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so like our spiritual journey is happening before we're born. Like me and you both do work on that in our own unique individual ways with our clients, but it's like it's happening, like the conditioning.
I Yeah, I
Yeah.
even have a dream of before I was born, a dream from the womb, and I thought that was impossible. I thought it was something I was making up. It's what sent my mom into labor. I used to have dreams of it, and then I researched, and that can happen. You can have a memory before you even come to this planet.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I love where you just took that conversation, because there was two elements what you've spoken about in terms of your journey this year with your spirituality opening and your understanding and awareness. And one of the things I really took from what you said, and just to sort of and share my experience again, just going back to Rythmia in Costa Rica and sort of that journey there, was that awareness. And again, another breakthrough for me, that awareness of the attachments that we have to elements of our life, of our being, of our past, of our experience. That was a huge part of my healing journey there and my spiritual awakening. And I actually came home, and when I was going through the integration process after, because please keep in mind the experience at Rythmia is incredible. It's the starting point, but it's the very starting point. It's the work that happens, you know, as you go forward. And I guess I connect with what you said, you know, the work for you with this element of you started in Antigua with that realization, but ultimately you're still in that journey even to this week where you were cooking again and you were able to reflect. But that's been a huge part of the last 12 months in terms of my spirituality, is that understanding of the connections and the attachments that we hold to experiences and things. And actually, when we can start to see that for what it is and have that awareness, because like you were saying, that's the starting point, everything changes from there. Everything changes
100%.
from there, because we can begin to have that realization. And once we've had that realization, you know, we move into that new space, that reconditioned space, that new level of awareness. And when we're there, we don't go back the way. We're in a new vibration, we're in a new frequency. Our consciousness has shifted. So I really connected with what you said.
And so when you came back, to, I remember when you said, because after you went to Miami, the integration didn't really happen there. And then
Yeah.
when you went back to the UK, I even specifically remember you saying you came back to a box of stuff, and you're like,
Yeah.
you didn't have a connection. And it helped me because when I came back to Montreal, like I was telling Rachel, I was like, I was looking forward to having my laptop with my big screen and everything. And then
Yeah.
I was like, who used to be here? Because I don't recognize
Yeah.
any of this. I was like, and it was scary. I was like, I'm like, I don't belong here. It was like, so, and I remember, and then when you said that, when you had shared it, it brought comfort. I'm like, okay, this is because I've shifted and I need to integrate my new self
Yeah.
into my environment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was when I walked through, and it was so interesting. You had the same experiences when I came back. So I was in Miami I ended up staying there 2.5 months, and that was an amazing experience. But what I realized when I came back to the UK, and we were warned about this, I guess. That's when the integration really, really started. So like that's when the sort of deep after work started. I was working through things in Miami, don't get me wrong. I was in a new space for sure, but it was like the work started when I came back to the UK. And so I walked in through my door, and this is how much I was resisting coming home. The flight that I got from Miami, actually, me and the girl that was sitting in the same area, it was a really quiet flight. We were both saying we don't want to leave Miami yet. The flight actually flew out about an hour or two, and then there was a technical fault and
I
had to go
remember.
back.
I
And
remember
I was
this.
like, that's how much that's never happened to me. And I've been all around the world. But when I came back and walked into my house, like you're saying, it was like, I felt like I was just walking into an Airbnb. I was like, what even is, like, that's how much it had changed, how much I changed inside of me, how much I'd shifted. It was just like, these are my things, but I have no attachment to them. Like I may as well be in an Airbnb right now. It was a really interesting experience, and it showed me like how much my perception had changed, and also things that were important to me just weren't used to be important to me, just weren't important anymore on like a material sort of basis.
Yeah, I can totally resonate with that. And I don't know if you did I did some of the little things, like I've completely changed my closet. I've thrown out so many things, like little things also, like just
Yeah.
I was like I even my fashion sense has changed. Like I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
and what what has been the most difficult transition for you
Yeah.
to accept and allow and surrender to, and all the things basically?
Yeah. So the most difficult was probably the family stuff. Like for me, a huge part of what came out of Rhythmia was realizing that I had a lot of family connections that were not in the best place and were not where I wanted them to be. And so I was in the Cotswolds, which is a beautiful country area in England, with a few friends. We have like a weekend group of entrepreneurs that I'm friends with. We go away, we have a weekend, and we always do this life audit together. And so one of the things that came out, and the first thing that came out for me, was family. It was family was my top goal, like that for the rest of 2021. I had, the business stuff, like elevate my skills and all that kind of came through that. But the top one was family. And the same, I have a process that I do often just to reflect on my goals. And what kept coming to me was family. Like for the first time, I think in my life, or at least in the last few years, this was coming up so strong for me. And I'm so business orientated. I was like, this can't be the main like focus for me right now, but it really was. And it was at an emotional point of like, I was getting really emotional thinking about that. So that was a huge element of my time in Costa Rica, was really working through the past with the connections there. But ultimately when I came back to the UK, then I knew that was a really significant part of the remainder of 2021. And so I came to North Scotland where my family live, and I spent time there in August and September. It was the first time I'd seen them in 2 years, because I hadn't seen them through the whole of COVID. And so there was this really beautiful and challenging experience that happened. And then I've actually spent time with them over Christmas and at the start of this year again. So that was one of the most challenging elements, but ultimately it's the willingness, and this is something I learned while I was in Costa Rica, to lean into that discomfort. That's been hard for me, but it's ultimately the connections I have now with my family. They're the best they've been in as far as I'm concerned, my adult life. And they're really in my life now in a huge way, which is beautiful.
I love that you shared that. I feel like that's something I needed to hear, because for me, anyways, with my family, things have shifted a lot, and I think they're continuing to shift. With my grandmother passing away this year was in August. It was probably, we all expected it because she was sick and she's elderly and whatnot, but because of the fact that we couldn't even go there and have a proper burial with her, it's brought a lot of emotions of the entire family, like right here. And I
Yeah.
would say broke down. Like one of the things that I realized, like I was like, I can't fake some things anymore. And the willingness to address some extremely uncomfortable elements, and there was no escaping it.
Yeah.
And so the surrender was real. And so I can attest to how challenging that is, but in a different way, I guess. But I
Yeah.
think for us we still have work to do. But it's funny that for me too, like for my business, I'm like, okay, my business is my main priority. My business, and my relationship with my husband. Those were the two things. And then I think there was a point, I was doing my mentorship with Joel Brown, and he's like, so what kind of daughter are you? What kind of sister are you? And there's like this guilt that came up right away, and I was like, push it down. And then it's funny how when something happens, it's like, okay, well now I have to deal with the guilt that I feel, or
Yeah.
the disconnect, because ultimately, your family is your family. You get to
Yeah.
choose a family, but you also have a family that you're born into. And
Yeah.
I believe in, to some extent, you all chose each other before. You have
Yeah.
those soul contracts.
100%.
Yeah, like I know when I was little and I had fights with my mom. I'm like, well, I didn't ask to be born. I'm like, well, actually, now I'm like, actually, I did ask to be born. I did choose you as my mother, and you have many things to teach me, even in the moments of trial and tribulation. And same with my brothers and sister. And so
Yeah.
that's been a huge realization for
Yeah.
me as well this year. A difficult one, but a
Yeah.
huge one.
And just like on topic, like the spirituality side, I think one thing that really came out from the journey in Costa Rica, and just to sort of tie that in what I was sharing, was that I had to go off on my own for a while. Me and my sister reflected on this recently. Like, I had to go off on my own for a while, for my own development, for my own spiritual awakening. I had to move away from the tribe for a little while and really take my own awareness to where it needed to be.
Which I
There's a lot of,
100%, yeah,
yeah, and
I
then
get
come
that.
back in. And I think that that's an important thing to share, because quite often when we have that calling to go on our own journey for a while, and I know this is something that really changed in the 60s, globally, people started to be called to the spiritual movement. Spirituality is a movement, and an element of that is being selfish, if you like. It's going into yourself and learning to know yourself and explore yourself. And so for me, this past few years, it was really important I did that. And Costa Rica, Rythmia was an element of that. But ultimately what it's done is I've gone through some real deep healing there, in terms of the release and the opening of me, my heart, and connecting more with who I am, and in my authentic self on a
Yes,
new, deeper
I
level.
I
And then
totally
returning to the tribe. I'm returning to the tribe,
yeah,
and yeah,
you're the way you're saying it is exactly how I felt. Like,
yeah,
it's, and it's funny because when I do inner child healing workshops with clients, and one of the things I say, it's safe for you to separate, it's safe for you to
yeah,
explore. And then when you feel the deep unconditional love from those around you, it's like that's what unconditional love is. And sometimes it's not communicated as such. And so I feel like now I've come back to my family, and I'm a different woman.
yeah,
I'm less afraid to express who I am,
yeah,
what's good for me, what's right for, and I think that it is necessary to separate, because
yeah,
especially a little bit from your family, because a lot of your subconscious programming, a lot of your inner wiring is attached to those people. And so
yeah,
if you never take the time to separate and explore, it makes it significantly harder for you to present a whole new version of you,
yeah,
the most authentic version, because you
yeah,
have like all these core limiting beliefs, is what I like to call them. And it's like when you start breaking them, then you have to really own it and then present yourself, because if
yeah,
not, then you get that's why the tension I feel sometimes comes, because you're just trying to scream that authenticity, but then they know something else, and it's not even their job to see things differently. It's your job to see it differently. So like when you
yeah,
do that selfish thing, I think it's the most selfless thing in some ways, because
yeah,
it's scary and it's challenging and it stretches you. And then when you're stretched, you're like, okay, now
yeah,
I have the audacity to come back.
yeah.
Okay.
That's when you're aligned, when you're like, it's like you're first most excited for yourself. Like, I want to get the information for everyone else, but I am exceptionally excited to hear everything you have to say. So what's up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of Rachel's journey as she went to Arrhythmia, had a massive spiritual awakening, and now that it's out and about on social media, she is pregnant and bringing a beautiful soul, birthing it into life. And what a year that must have been to have such a massive spiritual awakening. And then the gods, however you go about it, a soul is birthing through the human body, and it is very magical, and it gives me shivers. Just thinking about it gives me shivers. So if you haven't already followed Rachel, go check her out on your social media. Rachel, let's pick back up where we left off last week.
Yeah,
I'll leave the floor to you.
yeah,
Because
thank you. It's there's, I feel like it was only a week ago since we did the first part, and just this whole world is like shifted and opened up, because I obviously did my announcement, and that 100% came out of Rythmia, this whole experience. One of the things we spoke about last week in the episode in a recording, was obviously the massive changes that I was going through. And an element of that, as I touched on, was very much around that releasing of the deep-rooted trauma, some of what we've spoken about in previous episodes, but a huge part of my journey at Rythmia was that releasing. And I've really come to appreciate how we hold in the human body our experiences and the traumas, and how important it is for us to release that in order for us to release disease, which turns to disease. There's so much research out there to suggest that most of what we see in the world as sickness and illness actually comes from the lifestyle and the traumatic events we've faced through our life, or even past generations that gets passed down. So that's a whole episode in itself. But for me, Rythmia was a massive clearing of that. And it's been such a wild and beautiful experience to then come home and back to the UK and be going through that integration process. I had a lot of work to do that first month. I connected with a centre in London where I was living at the time called House of Wisdom, and they were just like godsend for me, because I would go there and have people around me that could support me and understand. And I think for anybody that's considering the ayahuasca journey, 100% the integration part is as important. And knowing that you're set up, one of my girlfriends is just about to go there and do it, and my advice for her was like, get yourself set up for when you come back, because that initial point at Rythmia is just the very, very starting element. There's the whole experience once you get home, which was really important to reflect on. So for anybody out there listening, just take that as well.
And I think a lot of times, at least one of the elements that I hear, and one of the elements that was true in my life, was we're often afraid to look in. We're often afraid to look in because that release can feel wonderful, but then you're reintegrating with a whole new perception of reality. Your entire identity has shifted. And so sometimes we're addicted to the traumas, and as much as they hurt us, that's what we know. And so when you go and you do that work and you release, the support is super important. And that's why I got into coaching. That's why I got into other different types of energy healing therapies, because sometimes we just really do need to be mindful. I had a friend, for example, who did a shadow course, and I think it's beautiful that there are passive courses like this, but if you're not trained or supported as you are doing this, it can get very scary very quickly. And so you got to be supported. And so Rachel, I would love to know the reintegration. First, if you could give us just a small example of physical relief, of like, because I know what you mean when you say you feel it in the body, but let's say for someone who doesn't know, what does that physical relief of the emotional trauma, if you have an example, what does it feel like? And then I would love for you to then go into the integration, because I think that was the magic, but this is like the integration of the magic, which is cool at its own level.
Yeah, so the Christmas just before I went to Rythmia, so it would have been Christmas 2020. I'll just start there for this. I had my eczema all inflamed. I was in a lot of pain, couldn't explain it, didn't know why, just a lot of pain over Christmas time, and my eczema was just going crazy. And when I got to Rythmia, one of the prep sessions, actually, I just had this crazy skin reaction. My face was like bright red, but it was this physical experience, this physical manifestation coming to the surface for me to deal with. And so I had all of these physical reactions go on, all of these physical experiences, but ultimately what was happening, and, just taking eczema as a example, it's very much connected with our emotional trauma as a root, or stress often as well. So what happened during that session in Rythmia was that it came to a head, if you like. I then went into the journey. I went into working with the plant medicine, the shamans. I was told, this is the emotional suppressed emotions from trauma that you've held. It's ready to come out now. Now, within the space of that week, what happened is my eczema healed. My skin that was red, hot, inflamed, crazy, my body was in pain. It healed within that week. I've never been bothered with it again. That's just one example of what can happen.
And I that is such a powerful example because it seems simple enough. But
Mhm.
if you go see, and I love the medical field, of course, it is needed in many, but if you go see a doctor, they will treat it. They won't go down to the root cause most often
Yeah.
of the time. And that
Yeah.
is one of the unfortunate parts of our systems. And there are so many things. Like I used to get cold sores every year, 3 times a year. And for the last 2 years, why? Because I have dealt so much. I I regulate my system regularly, and nothing would have told me before. For 10 years prior, I have to pop these pills, and I was always scared. Oh my gosh, what if this? And then the fear comes, and the more stress you get, then you get the cold sore, and I was scared to talk about it. And then I was like, the last 2 years, I'm like, I don't have it. Why? Because now I'm living my truth. I'm doing what I love, and I take the time to regulate my system. And so
Yeah.
these are these are just like, there's so many other examples. I will link one video below where I talk about, I used to have lower back pain until I dealt with some deep childhood trauma, and then boom,
Mhm.
back pain gone.
Yeah.
So whoever has something that is recurring, I just want you to consider the deeper root, and to reach out to Rachel, reach out to myself, reach out to different people who have healed these different physical symptoms by releasing their emotions.
Mhm. Yeah. It's so important, and it's something like, this is information that has been consciousness technology that has been around longer than we even realize. The medical model 100% has a place in our society for some things, but it's really enlightening to see the world go back to more of a place where we're realizing how impactful alternate medicines and holistic approach in wellness can really serve, whether that's hypnotherapy or speaking, or being within an environment working with shamans. So that was really significant for me. And just the other element to answer the question as well was, and ties this in with what you were saying and what we said at the beginning of this session about the integration, how important that is. Now, part of that experience that was also connected to the physical ailment I was experiencing with the eczema, I remember during my integration, one of the days I came home, I had the most insane day where I woke up and it was as though I was reliving myself as like a 20-year-old, my mental health, the issues I was dealing with there. And, we spoke briefly on this in one of our previous sessions, but at that point in time, there was days where I would be in a suicidal state. And I had this experience when I came back. There was one of these days, it was a Friday, and I was reliving it.
Oh my
And it came
goodness.
to the surface in order for me to, of course, release and work with it. And I had enough information to do that. But that was part of my integration in the release process. And again, just connecting with what you said about the support. Well, I went to one of my support systems, which was the House of Wisdom. I had the 2 amazing sessions. It turned out the other people that were meant to be there had cancelled, and I got this 1-to-1 by myself. And I had this insane vision where I was in higher realms and I was given the awareness that I'd been in between places. And I fully chose to step into my human experience. And I came down within an instant. I felt more grounded than I had in a long time. So, again, just more evidence that this is an ongoing process, and having that support, doing the work ourselves, yes, is important, but having that support is absolute crucial as well.
Do you feel like when it's just wild that you said that also, because when I did my spiritual healing in Antigua, one of the elements that just clearly started to evaporate was the suicidal tendency, especially when it came to money. And I spoke about this in my YouTube video, where that's my dark thoughts would just take me there. And do you feel that as you did this spiritual healing and you really chose to go there, that one moment where it came back super strong was
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the last layer of that identity kind
Yeah.
of trying to fight for its place, and it's like it's okay for you to let go away.
Yeah.
It like, I love you, you've served me, but it is time for us to separate. Do you feel that?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And I really believe, the things have to exit. It's like the purging process when we're physically having a release. It's like it has to exit somewhere. It's been within us and it has to
Mm-hmm.
exit. And I think that sometimes, like my eczema, it was flaring up and on its way out. Sometimes I've really seen this in my own journey. We have to relive those experiences, but we have a choice at that point in time. I just had an experience on Monday, and I had some limiting thoughts come up. Now, we have these days of what I say contrast. Some people speak about the universe testing. I personally don't believe that. I believe we're showing days of contrast. I believe that we are often at times living between different vibrations, but as we elevate and become conscious, we're
Mm.
shifting up those frequencies and levels of vibration. Now, we're given opportunity. For Monday, for example, I could have bought into that thought, that old identity,
Mm.
like you said, and continued down that path. But I have a level of awareness now where I can say, I see you, I hear you, I feel you, and I let myself feel it. That's very important, not to run away, but I'm no longer attached to you. And actually, I'm going to get the support that I need, which came in the form of the House of Wisdom again on Monday. I was in London. I went and did a gong bath ceremony. I spoke about it to some of my friends. I sat with it myself and I released it. And I decided, no, this is where I'm going now. And I've had a
That's
beautiful
powerful.
experience the last
That's
couple of days. So
that
it's
is
a choice.
that
Yeah.
is that, and that's the thing that I, first of all, I completely resonate with what you said, and that choice is our most fundamental human freedom.
Yeah.
And very few of us actually understand how to use it.
Yeah.
And so you nailed it. Like the way you explained it, for me anyways, was the perfect explanation. And I feel this sometimes as well. Like, and if I lose it, it'll take me a little bit of time to be like, wait a minute, I don't actually have to go there. And it's such a powerful realization, because what I say, sometimes there's like a little bit of like, you peel off the layers, and then there's a little bit of it that just comes in. It's like, actually, it's okay. I see you, I feel you, I love you, but I'm going to go this way now.
Yeah.
And so I would love to know, and I'm sure everyone who's listening to this, especially the moms or the moms to be, I would love to know how coming back with this massive spiritual awakening and shifts and identity shifts and perceptual shifts, and you come back and you're pregnant, and it's like your whole world is changing.
Yeah.
I would love to hear about that experience. I don't even have a question. I just want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I fully have come to appreciate divine timing, as in life and its timing. And I really believe that. And, when I came back, I actually wrote in my journal about this love that was coming in. And I wrote about this experience coming in. And I thought at that point in time that it was like my future husband or something. But I wrote about this love coming in anyway. And I'll tell you a bit more on that in a second. And also what was happening is there was massive healing going on, like we've spoken about, but also over this last sort of 18 months before I went to Rythmia, I've been on a huge journey with healing my womb space. I've had quite a lot of trauma between different contraceptions, between some childhood trauma that happened, between the emotional trauma of various things happening through my life. We hold so much in our womb space, in our hip space. I had pain, like severe pain going on down there. Again, another manifestation. So this past 18 months, 18 months to 2 years, I've been on this real journey with opening and healing that space. And then combined with all the work I did in Rythmia, I knew that
I just want to put a small highlight on this, because it's not something I speak about often on my channel, but I just want every woman, every single woman who is listening to this, please start doing womb healing.
yeah,
We do not, like, it's something I feel like it's like like when you're talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like my soul sister, literally
Yeah.
speaking. When I started doing womb healing, it's like I wasn't even conscious of it. It was a non-existent element until it came into my consciousness, and I saw things, and I started doing the meditations and healings, and I took a course, and it's still a process. It's an ongoing process, but it is not something to ignore. And we all have different traumas, either from our ancestors, things that may have happened in your own life. Just please pay attention. That's all I want to say about it right now, because it will go beyond the scope of this video. Maybe I'll link a couple of videos below of different meditations for you to start increasing your awareness. And sorry, Rachel, it was so important for me to highlight this,
Well,
because
thank you. Yeah.
because it's life changing.
It really is. And you're right. We don't speak about it. We don't speak about, we've got one of our major chakras, the sacral chakra, within that space, and we don't talk about it. And it's so important for us all to have those conversations and do the work there. And that's been a huge part of this journey specifically. And all of these insights, I remember doing my goals when I came back. Through me came this family orientation, which I'd never felt this connection. It brought me to tears on a call one time. I just had this awareness come in. And so that manifested through this past few months and into this year. And it has just been the most incredible experience. I 100% know. I was chatting to my Rythmia family just the other day there and celebrating, this has 100% come through that. And they've all been part of that as well. And divine timing, very, very deep spiritual experience for me being pregnant. An absolute divine timing. And to think, this time last year, I was leaving Rythmia to be just a matter of weeks off of birthing my first child into the world, who I know is somebody that's coming here to really be something significant. I've known that from the word go, for sure. Is very special. And just that whole journey in this being's creation, and how connected that's been to my spiritual evolution and my physical healing, and stepping into that new identity. So this point in time is really significant for me, and feeling very, very blessed to be doing it alongside a new life as well.
Amazing. I love that. Oh my gosh, this conversation. I don't know for you guys, but for me, I feel all the feels.
Yeah.
If there is a seed of consciousness, of shift, of hope, of new perception that you wish to share with the world, a layer really deep that you didn't see, and you're like, this year, it's the embodiment of a new truth always brings out something unique, special from our unified field. And so it's like a remembrance of some sorts that we forget. Is there something of that nature that you would want to share with the audience today?
Yeah, there's probably lots of things.
For sure.
There's probably
Was that
lots
not
of
a loaded
things.
question?
There's
Just a
so
little
much.
question.
Yeah, there's so much. I think just know that, just on topic, I'll keep it on topic, because there's so much I could say on topic, just to give you some relief that becoming consciousness it's not a straight road. It's not a straight road, but I just have so much gratitude for everybody that's here today. And I believe that we're here today at a very significant point in human history, that has chosen this path of spiritual and awakening, of becoming conscious, of enlightenment, however far you're taking it. I just take my hat off to you. I have so much respect for you, because it is not an easy journey, but please know that you're not alone. There is, thousands and thousands of us out there that are on this journey as well. And being around the right people is a significant part of that. and just really celebrating your journey is another important part. And I think the sort of the one thing I want to touch on actually that I wrote down, which I feel is probably relevant, is the quantum loop we spoke about. And so the quantum loop, and this is something I really learned in Rythmia, sometimes it can feel like we're going through the same experience over and over again, and it's because that's what's happening. You know, until we've learned a lesson in our evolution, in our spiritual journey, we will continue manifesting the same core experience in different forms. And I learned this really solid in the ceremony, because you go on these almost mini quantum loops where within a space of an hour or two you have the same experience over and over again until you've caught that insight, that thought, and then you move forward. That was just a condensed version of what happens for us in life. And so the sooner and quicker you can, like what we've been speaking about, Atena, just be conscious in sometimes the most smallest, tiniest, seemingly insignificant moments with a single thought, is vitally important for our shift in consciousness, and just sitting with it and learning. And I'm talking about the most smallest particle of energy, of thoughts, just something so teeny, like a repeat story that keeps going on in your head, a boundary that you consistently don't respect for yourself or for somebody else, or you know, whatever it is to you. Take these elements of your life as important as they are, because what I've really realized is the quantum loops, they keep going until we've learned that lesson, and we're in a vibration within that experience. When we can catch that feeling, that insight, and this is a huge part of the spiritual healing journey, and be looking at ourselves almost from a outside perspective without attachment to this is what this means and carrying all this shame and guilt, and just see it for what it is and see it as an opportunity. That's where the big shifts take place. And I really believe we're all being called to look at that and see the significance of the little moments. You will hear me speak about quantum leaps, you know, those big shifts in our experience where we go from one frequency to another, and our life suddenly, seemingly in a moment of time, snaps into something else. But the truth is that there will have been a sequence of small, tiny little adjustments in your thought processes, in the words you use, in how you're showing up in your identity, in what boundaries you set, in how you step forward in an empowered version of yourself or a disempowered version of yourself, you know, all the things. There's a tiny little collection of sequences that go to make that quantum leap. But it's really important for where we are right now. We see the significance of them little particles, those little thoughts and energy and moments of time, and how significant they are, and learn to work with them with the knowing that it's going to change and shift and evolve into that quantum leap for our own personal lives, but for us as a society as a whole. So that's the bit to share.
I had shivers in different moments. That was very channeled information.
Yeah.
For those of you, channeled means it is coming from the divine through her. If you have the time, and if not, that's okay. I can link a specific post of yours. I would love if you have any example for you know, everything that you said, it was like for me it was landing, but
Yeah.
for the person who hears this and feels a little like oof, I kind of get it, but I don't, like, what does this mean? Like, do you have an example, a simple one that people can understand? How did you break a loop, a quantum loop, and then do a shift?
Yeah. So let me think of a couple of little examples. So one, one we can take is around finances, manifesting finances, having, being an experience I would have would be waking up one day, being in a complete lack mentality, feeling that I was up against a wall and couldn't see a way moving forwards, and in an instant moving into a higher thought and vibration with support, creating a new thought around that experience and what I wanted to create in a day, coming from a place of service rather than being in lack and focusing in on all my problems. And, you know, within an instant manifesting a new client who I'm able to serve and ultimately change their life. That's something that I've seen play out a few times. So that could be an example. Another example would be, boundaries, you know, stepping into, for example, especially around relationships, I've seen this play out in a few different ways. But again, me being in a loop until I finally took the action and I did something different. But just the boundaries of maybe accepting something or a way of being treated, or the way in which somebody communicates with me, you know, having a low standard, accepting something that made me feel icky, made me feel awkward, that my body was telling me wasn't aligned with me, but I chose to ignore it because, for example, one of my old patterns was I would put other people always ahead of my own needs. So that's an example. And then part of this year, and again, you go, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, because that one can be very sneaky in the sense that, especially as you know, as coaches, if there's any coaches watching this, we tend to think, okay, well, I should be, as much as I say don't should, I should be able to handle this. I should be able to change my perception. I should this, I should that. And then it's like, wait a minute, hang on. I don't actually need an explanation. If it doesn't feel good in my body, I must, for my own self, or I could, maybe that's my word, place a boundary to reevaluate, because you are important. And I created a post one day, and I'll share that post below, or I'll just share the words. Boundaries are fundamental, and it's very different than putting up walls.
Yeah.
Right? Walls keep you away from your heart. Boundaries say, this is where I need to be. And maybe that's a nuance for a whole other video, but I think you touched on something quite powerful. And then I'm sorry, I told her, by the way, I'm gonna let you do all the talking, but then she says these things and I'm like, I can't help it.
No,
this is so golden.
This is a conversation. This is a conversation, and it's powerful. And to listen to this is really powerful, that we're both creating this, and we're both, you know, inputting the valuable parts of information. So no, it's perfect. And I think just so for me, you know, stepping into that higher identity with my boundaries, and actually this is no longer okay for me. This is not, I'm not accepting this any longer. I see my worth. I see who I am as a child of the universe, and as worthy as anybody else here. And I'm going to listen to my body going forward, and I'm going to start to communicate that in a loving way, or a direct way, whatever's needed at that time, but always with love. And so that for me has been another example of a massive shift. And that's just in the simplicity of how I feel about myself, how I hold myself, how I listen to my body and my intuition rather than ignore it when it's screaming at me for, you know, however long. So again, little components, but have added up to create quite a different experience in my life.
Amazing. Beautiful. Okay, Rachel, I literally could ask you a million more questions, and we will do more videos. I love you. Thank you so much for being so open, so vulnerable, and so giving with your knowledge, energy, and wisdom. I know I felt all the feels, and I have a very unique feeling about this video more than any other video we've done. I feel like you and I have come such, I don't even recognize the two women that we were 3 years ago.
No.
You know, and in the most beautiful way. And so for anyone who wants to watch those videos, I'm going to link it below. Maybe just create an album, Rachel, Atena, Rachel and Atena album, and really just for you to also see that the commitment to becoming your best self, to practicing the self-love, and, you know, practicing deep self-acceptance as you grow. you can see it. Like when you look at us, you can see it, and it's so worthy. And I genuinely do not believe there's anything more worthy, because when you take that time to be and align, you show up better for other people as well. I think as women, we're tempted to always want to give to others, be there for others, and you do need that. You need to, like, contribution is a human need. However, you need to first and foremost contribute to yourself. And when you have this thing where, like Rachel said, you can quickly identify an element that is not doesn't feel good, and you work through it and you take back that power, that is where you can give power where it's needed, give energy where it's needed, support where it's needed, and support from a place of love and abundance versus a place of like, oh my God, I need to feel important and I have to do this. It's such a different energy. And so with that, thank you guys for tuning in. Reach out to Rachel, reach out to myself. Rachel, anything you want to say before we say goodbye? The last words are yours.
Just thank you. And I think, the fact that we're doing this annual podcast, this annual recording, is just a really beautiful example of how it's a continued process. So we can all lose the pressure we put on ourselves that we have to be in a certain place at a certain time. This is a forever expanding, evolving journey that we have here called life. And I'm really excited that me and you is going to continue forward with that in the years to come, and where we're going to be this time next year as well, with all of the incredible things that are opening up, and our commitment to our continued growth and evolution, I think, is just really wonderful.